Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Life in Sport podcast, and we're joined by a very special guest. You may have seen him previously on Shah Nen's podcast episodes. He's played for Sydney FC. He also had a stint at Margate, Woking, Morecambe, and even QPR. His name is Terry McFlynn. Thank you for joining me today, and how's your day going so far?
CJ, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, all good over here in Western Australia, apart from we've got a little bit of rain today for a change.
That's not bad. Might make you feel a bit like back home over in Ireland, over there. So, and speaking of over in Ireland, you grew up, were born, raised, all that jazz in Ireland, Northern Ireland in particular, in Swatra. What was that like growing up there? And you played Gaelic football for a majority of your youth life, up until you were about 16. So what was that like as well?
Yeah, it was good. Look, Swatra's a very small village in South Derry in Northern Ireland. Everyone knows everyone. There was a little Gaelic team, hurling team in the village. Michael Davids was only small back then. I think it's a lot bigger now. I was back home recently and was up around the new pitch, new changing rooms, and the facilities is absolutely fantastic. The kids growing up now, but yeah, it was good. It was a really good childhood. Like you said, I played Gaelic football from the age of probably 10 or 11. Started off at under 12s and all the way through to probably 14. I think I finished playing. I went to St. Pat's Mahara, which is the local high school, and we probably had the best Gaelic team in Ireland at that time.
Oh wow!
Yeah, Mahara's. St. Pat's is the sort of focal point in South Derry for a lot of the villages and townships around where the kids would go to school there. So although it's from a very, very small village, the school itself was very big. And like I say, we had the pick of all the best players from the whole county. So invariably we'd win most competitions, the Dalton Cup, Cornanog, Ranafast, Hogan Cup, McCrory Cup, although I never played in the Ranafast or McCrory. Cornanog and the Dalton was the only two that I played in and won both of them. So,
oh, wow.
And then, probably at the age of 14, I started playing football, started playing soccer.
Yep.
A local club called Glenview United, just some branch from school, and then on to Mahara Colts, and that was it.
Yeah, nice. Was just the decision to switch from Gaelic football to soccer just because you wanted to play more sport with your mates, sort of thing?
Look, I've always watched soccer every Sunday. Back then, the first division, as it was, the Premier League wasn't in then, was on TV. So I'd always watch the football with my Uncle Mark, and every Saturday night I'd go down to his house and we'd watch Match of the Day, and then we started just going to the park every day and playing football, and then we said, well, rather than just the two of us playing in the park every night, why don't we join a team? So, like I say, I joined Glenview United. Was the first soccer team I joined. That was just with a bunch of friends from school.
Yep.
And then from there, we played in the South Derry District Youth League. Mahara Colts was the strongest boys club in South Derry at the time, and the manager there was a guy called Robin Clark, who's a wonderful man. I joined the Mahara Colts, got picked to play for South Derry District in the Mill Cup, which is a sort of prestigious youth tournament in Northern Ireland.
Yep.
And yeah, from there, a few scouts obviously watched the Mill Cup, and there's a few opportunities of trials in the UK and England and Scotland. And then it was coming up around the time for the Northern Ireland schoolboys selection and trials.
Mm-hmm.
I started going to that every Tuesday night and every Saturday morning. Myself and Mark would set off from Swatra to drive to Belfast, which nowadays isn't that big a deal, but back then it was a big thing. We had to drive to about an hour and 20 minutes each way.
Oh, wow. That's commitment.
Yeah, it was to the other side of Belfast, to Danny Blanchflower Stadium in East Belfast. Yeah, that went on for probably say 3 to 4 months, until the actual squad was selected, and thankfully I got into the squad, and that was it, the first Northern Ireland squad that I made.
Yeah, nice. And is that sort of when you realized, you know what, this is a real opportunity, like a real potential for me to, make it in football sort of thing?
Yeah, look, it all sort of happened pretty quick, CJ, to be honest.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it.
Yeah, look, we started playing for Glenview United, and that was a bit of fun. And then we moved to Mahara Colts, and that was a little bit more serious. And made the South Derry team for the Milk Cup. And then within probably 18 months of my first soccer game, I was playing international football against England at
Yeah.
Middlesbrough.
Wow. That's
Um,
definitely that's a so quick compared to some players they start playing, at 6 years old sort of thing.
yeah, so it was very quick. Probably thankful on my part that Northern Ireland's a small country, and probably at that age group there wasn't that many to pick from. So
yeah, true.
it was good. Like I said before, traveling as an international footballer, it was something that I'd never done before.
Yep.
You're on planes and buses and hotels and different training facilities, and just the organisation was great. All the people involved with the Northern Ireland schoolboys, Davy Cairns, Eddie Coulter, everyone that was involved was fantastic. They really gave us a real good grind. And as kids, and a lot of them boys, when they want to play in England, at that time, most of the boys were going for trials and signing for clubs, and that's how sort of my opportunity at QPR came around.
I was literally about to say, and that speaking of, trials and going to the UK and all that sort of stuff, you did end up at the youth academy of QPR. And what was that like, moving away from home, from, the basically everything you knew sort of thing other than football, down to, the UK, well, England, and going through the youth academy at QPR?
Yeah, look, again, that was a sort of a fortuitous moment for myself. The head of the youth academy at QPR, a guy called Chris Keeler. We were playing the Republic of Ireland in Dublin, and he was actually there to watch John O'Shea. And for whatever reason, I had a pretty good game that day. I don't know how you've seen anything, because it was 0-0, most boring game of football ever. But we finished 0-0, and after the game, the QPR scout from Northern Ireland, a guy called Ray Murda, contacted myself and my uncle and said, look, the QPR head of the academy was at the game and he's interested in signing you, taking you to London. So then it was a couple of weeks later, we played Wales at Dungannon, and again Chris came across, and that was basically it. I think that was around the February time. I signed a schoolboy form, which tied me to the club until July.
Yep.
And then obviously I'd done my GCSEs and finished school in May, end of May, June, and then short time at home. And then the 1st of July, flew to London. My mum and dad both came with me to sign the contract, and that was it. I started on the 1st of July at QPR.
Wow.
It was a strange sort of feeling to start with, CJ. Obviously coming from a very small village in Ireland, there was 400 people in the village. So the street I lived in London, there was probably more people lived on the street than I'd ever came across in my life. So it was a bit daunting, and obviously finding my way around London as a 16-year-old boy was a challenge. But I was very fortunate that the digs that the club organised for me. I was living with another Irish lad from Skerries, just outside Dublin.
That would have made it a bit easier that it was another Irish guy that you were living with.
Yeah, and the family was Irish as well. So
wow.
Landlady Pauline, her family was from Kerry. I still speak to her now. She's a wonderful woman and made us feel so much at home.
That's good to hear.
Her dinners were fantastic, and I think there was actually a couple of times she was called into the club and said that she was feeding us too much. Me and Barry was getting too fat, so we had to rein it in a little bit. But it was a wonderful time, wonderful experience to be in.
Now that's good to hear. And as you said, that's like a lot of teams obviously nowadays think about that, think about the players, like whether it's a player from another nation, they'll try and set them up with a teammate that's from that same nation. But back then that was more or less unheard of. You would which is, QPR would definitely ahead of their time in that respect, and it definitely would have benefited you so much. So I just want to tangent back into real quick your uncle Mark, because you speak very highly of him so far about a lot of your football journey beginnings. Would you say that he was one of the main, you could say, inspirations, or that sort of thing that really helps you get onto that track of of soccer?
Oh, definitely. Like, he's been the biggest influence on my career. No
That's
doubt
the
about
wording, yeah.
yeah, look, from a very, very young age, like I said, we were in the park every night, from probably 5 o'clock to 10 o'clock every night training.
Wow.
And then, like I said, when the opportunities came up to go on trial with Northern Ireland, he was there every single day to drive me to training Saturday mornings, early mornings. Yeah, he took me everywhere, did everything with me. Came across to London. He came out here to Australia.
Oh, wow.
Even up until the day I retired, he was the first person I'd speak to after a game, just to see how I played, because he was always
He would be the honest critic.
yeah, he was the one that told me the truth. So in my career, I didn't play too many good games. So yeah, we always had robust conversations after the games.
Fair enough. And obviously, after your time at QPR, you went to Woking and Margate and Morecambe. What was it like playing for those clubs?
Yeah, it was good. Look, I think if you ever get the opportunity to play football for a living, you can't knock it. And I know there's some people that say, "Oh, this club wasn't great, that club wasn't great." But for me, all the clubs that I played for was fantastic. I enjoyed my time there. Of course, there was challenging times, but for me, if there's a challenge, it makes you stronger. And I think, I left QPR at a time when ITV Digital had bought the rights of the Football League.
Yep.
And just before that deal commenced, ITV Digital as the company collapsed. So all the funding that was due to come into the clubs and the clubs had budgeted for was no longer there.
Yep.
So there was a lot of players around that time that were scrambling for jobs. And I think at QPR, we had 19 players that was out of contract in that one end of season.
Damn.
Meetings which you never like to go through, you never want to experience, but it's part of life,
Yeah.
So from there, I had a couple of trials at different clubs. I went to Leyton Orient, I went to Colchester, with the opportunity to potentially stay in the Football League. I was supposed to go to Germany with Leyton Orient on a pre-season tour. And then because of obviously funding and budgets or whatever, they didn't take any trialists on the tour. So I got a call from Woking and basically said, "Look, we've got a game this weekend. We know you don't have a club. Do you want to come down and play for us and see how it goes?" They were actually playing Swindon Town, so I thought, well, I'll go down. It'll keep me fit. It's an opportunity to get another game under my belt. And
yeah, of course.
You never know if I play well. There might be an opportunity at Swindon. But after the game, Colin Lippiatt was the manager of Woking. And yeah, he basically called me in and said, "Look, we want to sign you. This is the sort of financial terms that we're looking at." And yeah, for me, it was good. Probably the only downside of it to start with was that it was going part-time.
Okay.
So we were training as a squad. We were training Tuesday, Thursday nights and playing games on Saturday.
Okay, so literally like semi-pro type stuff.
Yeah. So there was a little group of us that had come out of the Football League, so we would meet up every day and train every day ourselves, and then obviously train with the team at night. And but Woking was a very ambitious club. They had real ambitions to get into the Football League. They spent a lot of money on players. We had guy Scott Steele from Scotland who was playing the left wing, very, very skillful, tricky. With Warren Patmore as a striker, who's probably one of the best non-league strikers ever. And I think at that time we ended up with about 30 odd players in the squad.
Wow.
And it was just one of them. It was frustrating at times, easy, because Colin was a lovely guy. God rest him, he's dead now. He was trying his best to keep everyone happy. He was rotating the squad, and we were playing in the conference, we were playing in the Sussex Cup, we were playing in the South East Counties Cup.
Playing in everything.
Every competition that we could play in, just so we could rotate the squad and give everyone opportunities. But I was only a young boy then, so I needed to be playing. Colin stepped down from the role, and Jeff Chappell came in. And Jeff was a great man. he was straight up and down with everyone. He was so honest. He just tell you how it was, and he basically came in his first meeting, and he said, "Look, I don't know half of you from a bar of soap, but half of you have to go. I've got to cut the wage bill in half." So he basically 2-3 training sessions, and then made his decision on who he wanted to keep and who he wanted to move on. And so he called me in the office one day before training and basically just said, "Look, you're not going to play in my team, so you've got to move on." So, which was fine. And I said, well, look,
it'd still be a bit disheartening to hear that you're not in the coach's future plan sort of thing, even though everything happens for a reason, and there's opportunities elsewhere. It's still, you work so hard and you just get a little bit deflated, a little bit sort of thing.
Yeah, of course, CJ. I think it's harder to have those conversations when you don't have a contract. So the conversation at QPR was more difficult because I was actually out of contract and I had no income. At least at Woking, I had a 2-year contract, and I knew, well, I didn't have to leave until I found a new job. Jeff was fantastic at that, and he made that abundantly clear. He said, "Look,
that's good then.
We're not going to kick you to the street. Try and find a new club. Get your agent to look for clubs, and once you get a club, then we'll terminate and you move on." And that's what happened.
That's good then.
Yeah, he was fantastic. The club
your next club was then Margate, and what was that like going over to Margate?
Margate was brilliant. I'll speak very, very fondly about my time at Margate, and that came about from a really good friend of mine, Gareth Graham, who's at Crystal Palace to start with, and then he moved to Brentford when Ron Nodes was the chairman of Crystal Palace, and then he bought Brentford. A lot of the Crystal Palace boys went with him to Brentford, and Ginger was playing regular for Brentford. Same thing, the A3 Digital collapse. He found himself out of work. Again, both of us was at Woking together. He probably moved a week or 2 weeks before me. And then once he found out that I was leaving Woking as well, he called me and said, "Look, we need a midfielder here at Margate. Why don't you come down here with us?" So my first sort of thoughts was, well, I was living in London. Woking was just outside London, which was commutable. It was fine. But Margate's obviously right down the south coast. So I thought, no, I'm going to have to move all the way down to Margate, uproot everything.
Yeah.
The best thing about it was that the club trained in Gravesend, which is just outside London.
That's good.
Yeah, and all the players lived in London. So
even better.
Didn't have to move. We only ever actually went to Margate for home games.
Okay, that's not too bad then.
Yeah, it was good. And the bunch of boys that was there, we had such camaraderie together.
You could all carpool down to the home games sort of thing.
We did.
Yep.
The manager actually played, I think it was Northwich Victoria we played, and there was a crash on the M25, and there was about 7 players was late because we were all carpooling. So he was raging. That's how he tried to bring in a rule that no more than 2 players in a car.
Okay.
We that never worked. shared the drive and shared the cost as well. But so that was brilliant. And for away games, we'd obviously meet at London Euston, the train station, and we get the train. Yep. The coach would go ahead of us, pick us up, whatever train station we got off up north. But yeah, that group of boys they were fantastic. They'd come up 3 divisions before myself and Gareth Graham joined. Lee Turner, the goalkeeper, joined. Simon Baird, Leon Braithwaite. With John Keister in midfield, who's a Sierra Leone international. They were really, really just good, honest, genuine guys that love playing football, love playing for each other, and enjoyed the crack as well.
That's amazing. And obviously after Margate, you went to Morecambe. What was it like playing for that team? And again, being around the club and whatnot?
Yeah, Morecambe was completely different to Margate. Morecambe was full-time. So
okay, that's good.
Yeah, so that was an opportunity which I seen to get back full-time, to get professional again. The manager was a guy called Jimmy Harvey. Mm-hmm. And Jim was the assistant manager of Northern Ireland with Sammy McElroy.
Okay.
So I was fortunate to be still playing for Northern Ireland when I was at Woking and Margate in the under-21s. Mm-hmm. And obviously when we have an international game, the under-21s would play the day before the senior team. So Jimmy was always there. He was always running the hotel, and we'd always catch up. And because he was managing Morecambe in the conference and I was playing in the conference, we obviously saw quite a bit of each other. And he always said, "Look, you're going to come and play for me one day." And we actually played them on the Saturday at home at Margate, and I scored. And then after the game, we're just having a beer in the bar afterwards, and he said, "Look, I'm serious. I want you to come and play for me." So I said, "Well, look, I want to get back full time. So if the two clubs can sort it out," and Chris Kinnear, who was the manager of Margate at the time, was happy to let me go, then that's what I wanted to do. I spoke to Chris, and he was fantastic. I said, "Look, I've always wanted to get back full time professional, and it's an opportunity." And he just said, "Mate, you go with our blessing. No problem. You've done well for us. You move on." So yeah, I moved up to Morecambe. Again, wonderful people. They were owned by a guy called Peter McGuigan, who owned Umbro. So he's a very, very wealthy man. The club itself was fantastic. The people around the town of Morecambe and Lancaster, wonderful people, great supporters. And we, like I said, Jim Harvey was the coach. We had Andy Much was the assistant coach, former striker for Wolves. And the way we wanted to play and the way Jimmy wanted to play was fantastic. They were the most attractive style in the conference. Obviously got promoted from the conference into League Two, into League One, and then unfortunately this year they got relegated back to League Two. But they built a brand new stadium. They're a club that's on the rise. Like I say, I was delighted for all the people that was there in the background, the kit men, the laundry ladies, the office staff, whenever they did get promoted, because the hours they put in at the football club, and it is a community club. Everyone in the town gets behind them, and yeah, it was great to see them at Wembley. Jim Bentley, who was the captain when I was there, he was still captain when they won the playoffs. To see him walk up the Wembley steps and pick up the trophy was a joy to watch.
That's amazing. And just touching on, tangenting away from the career chat for a bit, obviously the Premier League season and, championship seasons and all that are just come to a finish now. And we know the teams that have been promoted and relegated and whatnot. What are your thoughts on Luton Town getting promoted to the Premier League?
Yeah, brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. It's a fairy tale story.
I think it's the first team that's ever gone from the top to the bottom and back up to the top league.
Yeah, right. I didn't know that stat, but yeah, look, Luton, I played there a few times. It's a great little town. I know some guys that used to play there, and they speak very, very fondly of Luton Town as a club. Kevin Gallen, a good friend of mine, was there for a while and scored many goals for Luton Town. But yeah, it's a great story. It's a great, I think it's a great example, really, of what you can achieve with good people.
Absolutely.
I think they've got one player there. His name escapes me, but he's gone all the way through from the conference, all the way through to Premier League with the club.
Yeah, which is amazing.
It is, and I think that speaks volumes of the club as well.
Yes,
they reward loyalty in that way. And I think I wish them all the very best in the league next season. And £200 million windfall is going to help them a hell of a lot. So it's a fantastic story, and I'll look forward to watching them play next year.
Oh, absolutely. Like I'm a Leeds United fan, and obviously, as you know, they got relegated. But I mean, it stings, but it's great to see a team like Luton Town, not the usual suspects going promotion, relegation all the time. A team that's really worked so hard for so long to get promoted again and that, they're back in. So it's great to see that. I just hope, obviously, Leeds can get promoted again at the end of next year. I don't know whether that'll happen or not. And Wrexham, obviously, they're promoted back into finally, I think it's League Two, which is amazing to see that. Obviously, Brian Reynolds and his counterpart have done such an amazing job from taking over there. I just want to get your thoughts before we continue the chinwag about the A-League Grand Final coming up on Saturday. It is the Central Coast Mariners, obviously, up against Melbourne City. Who do you think is going to win? All that sort of stuff. Yeah,
look, I think it's fitting that the top two teams is playing in the Grand Final. For me, they've probably been the two best teams all season, most consistent teams all season. I think of what Nick Montgomery's done with his team and his club's fantastic. I think you can just actually see, from the first whistle that they're all playing for each other. They're all playing for the club, playing for Monty. Melbourne City's obviously been the benchmark for the last 4 or 5 years in the
Oh,
A-League.
yeah.
I think it's going to be a fantastic game. I think, obviously, with the game being in New South Wales now, I think the Mariners will probably have the most support there, obviously, geographically.
I myself am a Mariners fan, raised on the Central Coast, currently living on the Central Coast. So from what I've seen in the Facebook groups and whatnot, there's definitely a fair few thousand who are definitely at least going to the game.
Yeah. Look, and I think it'll be a fantastic game. Who's going to win? I'm not sure. I think in the previous occasions they've played each other this year, it's been really tense affairs and really.
It has. It's been. I won't be surprised if it goes down to penalties. Honestly.
Yeah. Look, they've been difficult to separate them all season. So I wouldn't be surprised either. And I think there's a lot of emotion around the game as well. Obviously, with the Mariners' first grand final in 10 years and Scott Jamieson retiring. And
Jason Cummings possibly leaving as well, sort of thing.
Yeah, possibly Jason leaving as well. So there's a lot of things attached to the grand final. And I think if everyone can just play the game and not the emotion
and not the politics, I
think we'll have a fantastic game.
Absolutely agreed. And the reason I brought that up was to tangent into your time at Sydney FC, because the first season you're at Sydney FC, you guys win a grand final against the Central Coast Mariners, which was the inaugural season of the A-League. First of all, what was it like moving all the way over to the other side of the world? From literally everything, to hot, bothersome Australia, all that sort of stuff. What was it like your first season? And of course, capping it off with a win, winning the grand final.
Yeah, look, it was a big move in terms of distance, and obviously my family was all still in Ireland. So when I was living in England, it was easy to jump on a plane and be back in Ireland within a couple of hours. So to move to the other side of the world. My wife Emma is from Australia, so she had been with me in London since I was at QPR. So
that would have made it a little bit easier, sort of thing.
Yeah, well, Emma wanted to come home. I was at Morecambe at the time. The A-League was just starting, so it was a new adventure for us, and it was a good opportunity for us to move to Australia, be part of a new league. Our first port of call would have been Perth, where Emma's from. But back then, Steve McMahon was the manager, and he'd already signed I think it was 4 foreigners you were allowed at the time. So I went to Sydney FC on trial. Was there for supposed to be a week's trial, but ended up being 2 weeks. That was fantastic. Ian Crook was the assistant coach who took all the trialists. Pierre Lebowski was obviously the manager. And after the second week, myself, I signed. Dave Carney had signed a week prior to me signing. Then Matthew Bingley came in. And I think I was the last player signed, so that was the squad complete. We got down to work. Sorry, there was one more player to come in. That was Dwight York. We found that out later on when we were on pre-season. But I was the last of the trialists to get signed. But it was fantastic. We got to work straight away, and we knew just from the mentality that Pierre had as a head coach and the standards that he set, that we were going to be successful. We didn't know how successful, but we knew that every single thing that we were doing, whether it was Sheva in the mornings or whatever it was, Pierre, you had to win. So if it was even a game of tennis or whatever, he just instilled that winning mentality in us. With this one training session, it was about 37, 38 degrees out at Football New South Wales.
Good. Yeah, fun.
On the back pitch, before they were synthetic, they were grass pitches, and we were playing. It was a 5-a-side, and the rule was the session finished if you won 3 games in a row.
Okay,
that's all it was. We thought, okay,
and how long did 5-a-side go for? Like how many minutes per game?
So it was probably 3 minutes per game. But it was intense. It was in a small area. There was 4 teams. Winner stays on. And you just rotate line. So he said, "Look, it's up to you. You win 3 games, the session finishes. No problem."
Yeah, cool.
We were playing, so you'd win 2, then you'd get beat. You'd win, you'd beat. Someone else would win 2.
But you'd have to win 3 in a row. Not
win
2
3
and then a few later win 1.
No, had to be 3 on the bounce.
Wow.
So we were there for about 3.5 hours in
Wow.
until Ian Crook actually told Pierre and said, "Look, the boys are cooked. They're finished.
Yeah.
They have to keep going. They have to," and that was it. It was just
Yeah.
the mentality, and no one wanted to lose, so everyone kept
Yeah.
trying to win. And then, I think the pre-season we started, that was probably February.
Yep.
And then the league didn't start until August. So there was obviously that break between the NSL and the A-League starting. I think we played about 20 pre-season games, including a trip to Dubai for pre-season, plus the Oceania Champions League. We went to Tahiti. We won a tournament over there. So
you did, yeah.
We had played over 20 pre-season games, and I think we only lost 1.
Wow. So if that doesn't say, an omen as to how the season was going to go for you, I don't know what does.
Yeah. And then look, probably the most difficult week probably in that season was when we lost to Melbourne Victory 5-0 down at Olympic. And I remember we came into the change room on the Monday morning after the game. Obviously, we came back, we'd been embarrassed, and I think Archie Thompson scored a hat-trick, and I can't remember who got the other goals, but yeah, they absolutely annihilated us that day. And Pierre made us watch the whole game again.
Yeah.
Again on the Monday for training. And I remember walking in the change rooms, and he had written on the wall with a permanent marker, "No one likes a loser." So everyone, wow. And he said, "It's better to lose 1 game 5-0 than 5 games 1-0. This doesn't happen."
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good saying.
Yeah, and below it he said, "This doesn't happen again."
Yeah,
and that was it. It was, we went and watched the DVD. Back in them days, there was no sports code or anything like that to cut.
Yeah, no, there was none of that.
So it was the full thing from start to finish. He didn't say a word. None of the coaches said a word. As soon as it was finished, he turned it off and walked away. And that was just the mentality of that group, was that we were going to go and win the grand final. Yep. So, we got through. Adelaide won the minor premiership, deservedly so. It was us and Adelaide all the way through that season. And then back then, the semi-finals was 2-legged.
Well, it is now. It's back to 2 legs now.
Back to 2 legs, and Adelaide obviously had the right really to decide where they wanted to play, and they decided to play the first leg in Adelaide, which we drew 2-2, and then we knew we had the second leg back at Allianz. I think we won 2-1. Mark Rudin scored, and I think Alvin Checkley might have scored a free kick. And then, that was it, into the grand final against the Mariners. Probably the first 10 minutes, we should have been at least 1, probably 2 goals down. I think Andre Gumprek missed a really good chance. Stuart Petrie missed a good chance.
They bottled quite a few at the start of that game.
Yeah. But Clint Bolton for us was immense the whole game. And then, I think it was by the 60th minute, Dwight made a run into the box. No one really tracked him. Stood off him until he found his way into the box, squared it for Steve Corica. And he put it, I think it was through Alex Wilkinson's legs and under Danny Vukovic, and that was it, 1-0.
Yep.
And then, just remember the last, I think the Swans won the AFL that year, and right on the siren, Leo Barry took a mark.
Yeah, he did.
And all I remember from the grand final is that Clint Bolton did the exact same thing. I can't remember who it was. It might have been Matt Osman, launched the ball into the box, and Clint Bolton rose above everyone and plucked this ball out of the sky. And then I knew then that was, that's it.
That was the match sealer sort of thing. Yeah. And just tangenting real quick, obviously from your Gaelic football days, when you moved over to Australia, did you start following AFL by any chance?
Yeah, I did. Obviously, Ty Kennelly was playing for the Swans at the time.
Yep. So do you follow the Swans because of Ty Kennelly, or do you have a different team?
No, I follow Swans because of Ty. So we started, there was an Irish paper in Sydney, the Irish Post, and we did a few things together for that. We did a few things at the Gaelic Club, and so we got pretty friendly. So he'd get me tickets for the game, and I'll give him tickets to the Sydney FC games, and he'd come and watch the boys play. And
nice.
Yeah, I'd go and watch the Swans as often as I could. And even when Tag retired and he was still there as a staff, and then he left, and I think he's at GWS now. But
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think he's a development coach there. But yeah, I'll try and go and watch the Swans as much as I could when I was in Sydney.
I'm a Collingwood fan myself, so but definitely it's always interesting to people who there's a lot of Gaelic football. Obviously, people who may not know, Gaelic football is very similar to Aussie rules AFL football. It's not the same, obviously. It's just very similar. And that's why I always like to ask when there's a person with a Gaelic football background that I have on the podcast, if they follow Aussie rules or AFL, whether or not they ended up in the AFL or not. And so obviously your time at Sydney was obviously the longest part of your career, 2005 to 2014 as a player. 2 grand finals, that honestly, you achieved it all at Sydney FC. My next question, you could say, really about that is, how did you handle the difference in season layout or format compared to over in the UK, where in the A-League there's a grand final and a finals system, whereas it's UK is promotion relegation based down to the final week, match week sort of thing, no big grand final sort of thing.
Yeah, look, I was probably used to the playoff system in the lower leagues in England. With the playoffs to try and get into the league above.
Yeah, true.
But it took me a while to get my head around that the grand final winner was classed as a champion.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
That if obviously over the course of a season, and it's a league, it's not a cup competition. So over the course of a league, back then it was only 21 games.
Yeah.
So over the course of that first season in particular, Adelaide United was the champions. They were consistently at the top of the league. They finished with the most points amassed over a season. But yet the history books show that Sydney FC was the inaugural champions of the A-League.
Gotcha. So by the laws of the Premier League, Adelaide United were the champions. But because there was that grand final, it's, Sydney FC are the champions.
Yeah. And look, I think there's no right or wrong way.
No.
I think it's just the way it is. And I think in Australia, you look at AFL, you look at NRL and all the other codes, everyone loves a final series. They love a top 6, a top 8, a top 4, whatever it may be. And obviously for us, thankfully, that first season in particular, we won the grand final and that was it.
Yeah.
2010 was a little bit different, obviously, because we won the Premiership and the grand final.
You got the double, yep.
Yeah. But yeah, look, in terms of adjusting to Australian football, the thing that I missed was the number of games. I was only playing back then 21. I think when I finished, we might have been playing 26. Whereas in the UK, you're playing
40 plus.
Yeah, 35, 36 league games plus cup games plus intermediary cups, whatever. So you're talking, back then I was still playing international, so you're probably looking at 50 games a year.
Yeah. And so you're like, what do I do with all this time off?
Well, the difficult thing, CJ, was that to maintain that level of match sharpness and fitness, you actually had to train harder during the week than during the game.
Yeah, shit. Yeah, no, that does.
So probably on a 7-day turnaround, probably day 3, the conditioning day was actually harder than a game. You do your 4v4 small-sided games, MAS runs, everything that they wanted you to do basically, and that was a harder session than the actual game itself. So that for me was probably the biggest adjustment, was that the amount of training we did as opposed to the UK. Whereas pre-season in the UK is probably 6-7 weeks max. You get a real baseline and a foundation of fitness, and then it's just basically playing games, recover, play. Whereas in Australia, pre-season's 13-14 weeks. You probably first week of testing, then you probably have 2 to 3 weeks of foundation building up, and then you're into pre-season games. So you probably play another 10, 11 games in pre-season, and then the good thing now, obviously, they've introduced the FFA Cup or the Australia Cup, whatever it's called now. So that gives the boys a few more games during the pre-season as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, I think on the whole, I enjoyed my time playing in the A-League.
Yeah, nice. So I've got some final questions, followed by some quick fire fun ones, and then wrapping it up with what's next. So my first question is, I mean, we did mention it earlier, but who was the biggest influence on you as a person? I'm guessing it's your uncle.
Yeah, definitely my uncle Mark. There's no question that. Yeah.
No, that's fair enough. This one I thought of the other day, so you're actually the first guest I'm going to ask this with. What are 3 life lessons that you've learned that you wish you knew when you were younger?
Oh,
Or if there's not 3, even just one.
I think never get too carried away with success.
Mm-hmm.
Never too down with failure. Maintain a positive attitude, and that's probably about it, to be honest.
Yeah, nice. And so the quick fire questions, first of all, Apple or Android?
Apple.
Absolutely. What's your favorite movie?
Scarface.
Oh, great film. First guest that I've had that's ever said that movie, but it's such a great film. What's your favorite type of music?
Country music.
Okay. Any particular artist or country music in general?
Country music in general, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's just-
nice. Have you got Luke Combs tickets?
No, I haven't.
No. Fair enough. What's your favorite food?
Favorite food. I do like salmon and salad.
Yeah, nice.
But I've probably been eating too many burgers recently.
Fair enough. Well, then what's your favorite type of burger?
Oh, there's a little chip shop near me
Mhm.
here in Perth, and they do a burger with a lot, which is, yeah.
Nice.
Too more-ish.
Fair enough. What's your favorite drink?
Well, I just got a cappuccino delivered off there, so
Yep.
yeah, I'll say a cappuccino.
Yeah, very nice. I was literally about to ask what's your coffee order, but we now know what your coffee order is, which is cappuccino.
Yeah.
So my final 2 questions, they're not quick fire. First of all, what obviously on the screen, Mercer and McFlynn, what's that? Let everyone know, what that's all about.
Yeah, look, obviously, when I retired from playing, I worked at Sydney FC as a football operations manager for a few years, and then I moved across here to Perth. I worked at the academy at Perth Glory for a while as well, and when I left Perth Glory, we wanted to stay in Perth. So I've always had a passion for helping people, and during my time at Sydney FC and at Perth, I was helping a lot of the players with transitioning from country to Australia and helping them with their careers and settling them into clubs. And so we decided to set up a football agency.
Yeah, nice.
Working with a lot of good young players at the minute with their careers and guiding them on which way to go with their careers and presenting opportunities for them. And hopefully some of them will go on and have the privilege that I had for a long time of calling myself a professional footballer. And if we can help them on that journey, then that's what we want to do.
Yeah, nice. That's awesome. And my last question is, what's next for Terry McFlynn?
Oh, look, with my business partner Tony, we're really enjoying what we're doing at the minute. And like I said, we've got some really good young players that are on the cusp of doing good things. So yeah, we're excited to be on the journey with some of them players and adding to the players that we currently have and creating opportunities down the track.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just quickly click stop recording.